program. Sir, with your permission. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I will rise. These are the famous words by Maya Angelou, who has taught us this mantra, the lesson to rise, to resist, to survive, and establish one's space in the society. It is a lesson we learn every day. And remembering that note, on the occasion of the International Women's Day, I take this opportunity to welcome you all to this special lecture to be delivered by Professor K. Sunita Rani, Professor, Center for Women's Studies, University of Hyderabad. Before the lecture begins, I request our Registrar Sir, Dr. Saidur Rahman, to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Very good afternoon. First, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and thanks to the Department of Women's Studies of our university for organizing this special lecture on remembering the pioneers Savitribai Phule to Alexandra Kollontai. I would also like to express my thanks and gratitude to Professor Sunita Rani, University of Hyderabad. The 8th day of March is celebrated all over the world as the International Women's Day. Since the beginning of the early 20th century, this special day has become almost synonymous with women's struggles for their rights and empowerment all over the world. Whether it was the suffragette movement or protest against imperial aggression. However, today I shall not speak about the macro aspects of this day. We are now in the post-modern era, and the focus has now shifted from grand narratives to small localized narratives. In the microcosm of every woman's life, the International Women's Day holds a lot of significance. Their fight against inequality and oppression in every sphere of life is no less great and courageous than any great.
That isolation became quite a burden for them. And it is in those times, and it is on behalf of these women that Cornelia Surabji stood and fought cases and brought them victory, made them protected by women like Cornelia Surabji. And her mother, when we talk about Cornelia Surabji, we cannot but refer to her mother, Francina. As I said just now, Francina had influenced even other stalwarts like Pandit Ramabai Saraswati and Tarabai Shukla as well. A generation of women activists, a generation of women writers, a generation of women rebels against oppressive structures, against oppressive institutions. And her had its great impact on the later, where there are two individuals involved, distributes the rights equally, rather in an equitable manner, rights and duties. But this institution called marriage, it invests all rights in men and invests all duties in women. Isn't this inequality? And if this inequality becomes the basis of family, then how can we expect a happy family? How can we expect? What kind of equality can we expect from such an institution? Is the fundamental question that she raises, the question that is being debated till today. And both Pandit Ramabai Saraswati and Tarabai Shinde have gone back in history like we are doing it today, to look at the origins, to look at the roots, to look at the pioneers. Both of them have gone back to those classics, those dictums that we have received, which have presented women in a subordinate position, and the thought that is still influencing us, not just during the times of Pandit Ramabai Saraswati and Tarabai Shinde, but even today. Savitribai Phule is a more familiar name. She did not let it. She has critiqued, she has looked very closely
তুমি তোমার ফোন থেকে শোনো,
possible patterns.
তোমাকে আমি এটা লিংক পাঠিয়ে দিচ্ছি।
The very first woman teacher in India, who did not merely teach but who motivated the students, who opened schools for girls, for widows, shelter homes for widows, particularly for students from marginalized communities. We can see like a woman raising a gender question has addressed several layers of the society, knowing very well that gender is interconnected with other identities as well. What poem she has written, what writing she has come up with, very few. But the way she is talking about education, let us not forget that 19th century India was also debating how to decolonize ourselves, how to use our discretion as to what should be received, what should be rejected. For her, education, English education, liberating education, emancipatory education, revolutionary education was the need of the day, because the traditional spaces of learning did not allow some people to enter, like women, like people from marginalized communities. So she in fact proposed an alternative. She dismissed the space which was excluding some people, and she thought of an alternative system where everyone is welcome to learn. The most ideal system of learning where nobody is unwanted, nobody is unwelcome. Right? That is the ideal feature of a system of learning, that you are welcome to learn. Fatima Sheikh, who accompanied Savitribai, who was with her, who worked along with her, the very first Muslim woman teacher, who gave her entire life to spread education, particularly girls' education. And Rakia Sakhawat Hussain, I'm sure you must have heard about her story, Sultana Street. Her numerous articles where she was debating nation, where she was debating, liberation, where she was debating equal rights for all the genders. Sultana's dream is a femination. Her dream of gender equality is achieved in her story, is achieved through femination, that is a feminist utopia, which is in her thought, which is in her mind. She probably knows that it is not possible to achieve a feminist utopia, but at least she could convey that idea to the readers. But that feminist utopia is not like other utopias where unachievable, impossible things are talked about. Rakia Sakhawat Hussain tries to redefine epistemology, women's epistemology, women's knowledge. In her story, she presents women in public domain men in private domain by reversing the roles. Women leaders, women teachers, women administrators. There is no end to their achievements, particularly scientific achievements. Saving water, trying to fly, major scientific developments. The dream did come true. But the way the women in their world, in the feminiscia, did not face any obstacle, that dream could not be achieved. The obstacles continue to pervade the world, particularly in the women's path. As you can see, I'm only referring to those women who raised voices in India during the 19th century and early 20th century. I do not mean to say that there were no women rebels before that or after that. There's a long history of women who have been fighting continuously without getting tired, without stopping anywhere, not even pausing for a minute. But at some point we have to focus on a point. So that is my effort. Gradually, I'm moving towards it. Around the same time, when women in India were addressing the questions of gender, caste, community, religion, national movement, education, there were also women in the West, basically from the mainstream, who were there raising their voices, who were following the path laid by Mary Wollstonecraft towards the end of 18th century. Mary Wollstonecraft for the first time talked about rights of women. Who talked about rights of women till then? Probably there were other words used, not the word rights. And talking about the contemporaries of 19th century women activists in India. Exactly like Rakia Sakhawat was saying, Charlotte Perkins Gilman was designing feminicides where men were like a big no or men were absent, but women were able to handle the entire country in a systematic manner where happiness and plenty were always there. There was no sorrow, there was no suffering, there was no violence. Her land, her work talks about this feminist utopia where women assert themselves. Similarly, her work on women's mental health, particularly mental health of creative women, created really creative visuals in the erstwhile in the contemporary society. The yellow wallpaper that Charlotte Perkins Gilman wrote towards the end of 19th century. Virginia Woolf was talking about professions for women, a room of one's own, the basic rights of women, the basic needs of domesticity. Elaine Showalter referred to the tradition of women's writing, women's histories. But despite all this, there were limitations to what they were talking about. Very radical ideas for their times, certainly. Who talked about professions for women? No, Virginia Woolf started talking about it because until then, even George Bernard Shaw was ridiculing Mrs. Warren's profession. See, uh, in a different context, of course, who talked about a space for women, a room of one's own, not just a space, a room, a privacy, a table, a pen to write, a radical idea. But all of them were revolving around the concept of domesticity, having a home, having a space, having a room of one's own, being able to earn, being able to choose a profession, having a family, being able to ask for right to own, being able to enjoy a respectable position in society. Weren't there colonial overtones in what we were talking about? Gilman was referring to the yellow wallpaper where there were comments against the migrant Chinese. So Mary Wollstonecraft Though she was talking about equal education for boys and girls, she was trying to say that girls should take care of home, women should take care of home. Because if they take care of home, there will be good children. Good children become good citizens. Good citizens make good nations. And they cross the boundaries of the nation to achieve, to conquer new lands. What does it mean? Definitely, there were colonial overtones as well. Though the gender issues were the priority, the colonial identities were very much intact. They were they were homogenized women. They were mainstream women. They were all white, middle class, heterosexual women who had a comfortable or uncomfortable homes. Even if they were uncomfortable, they were there. Homes were there, right? And there were serious limitations to the gender questions that they were facing. And it is in this context that we talk about a major figure in history who has questioned those aspects, those points that the other mainstream women feminist writers could not even touch. Alexandra Kollontai. Alexandra Kollontai was a major figure in the Russian socialist movement from the turn of the century through the revolution and civil war. It's very, very interesting, very relevant today. Today we are in the midst of the war between Russia and Ukraine. We don't know when we are going to be drawn into this war. Alexandra Kollontai had origins of she had of Ukrainian origins, she had Russian origins, she had Finnish origins as well. Now she came from all the three backgrounds, which also shows us the hollowness in the war between Russia and Ukraine. They were one and the same. And the revolutionaries like Alexandra Kollontai took birth from there. And those were the people who brought gender, class, labor together. It is not just about being a woman, but it is about being a working woman. Being a working woman and exploring the horizons of work, self-esteem, respect, dignity, and demand for rights. It's only proper for us to think of women like Alexandra Kollontai. She has published extensively. There is this, for those of you who are interested in knowing more, there is this website called Marxist.org where all her writings are included. About her life, her writings, everything is there. Please read. Here is a light. Here is a woman who has written, like who has written words of fire. It is beyond description. The power of her words. She has touched the psychological world, she has touched the physical world, she has touched the political worlds, whatnot. But it's also important, we all know the background of International Women's Day, and our registrar was also talking about the International Women's Day. But let us also once again think about it, like what exactly was the context of it? Today we see that in several places there are competitions in Rangoli, music, this and that. And then there are prizes given away to women who have played their roles very well as mothers, as sisters. And we also paint places in pink, like all TV channels have this pink color today. And many offices have pink color today. They assume pink color today. But was it really pink? Why is International Women's Day painted pink? Wasn't it red? Weren't they fighting for their right to vote? Weren't they fighting for equal wages? Weren't they fighting for better working conditions? Let us see. International Women's Day has been observed since the early 1900s. We all know that. In 1908, 15,000 women marched through New York City demanding shorter work hours, better pay, and voting rights. In accordance with a declaration by the Socialist Party of America, the first National Women's Day was observed across the United States on February 28. Women continued to celebrate National Women's Day on the last Sunday of February until 1915. In 1910, a second International Conference of Working Women was held in Copenhagen. Clara Zetkin, about whom we all know, who was leader of the Women's Office for the Social Democratic Party in Germany, tabled the idea of an International Women's Day. And it is following the decision agreed at Copenhagen in Denmark in 1911. International Women's Day was honored the first time in Austria, Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland on 19th March. More than 1 million women and men attended International Women's Day rallies, campaigning for women's rights to work, vote, be trained, to hold public office, and end discrimination. Please let us note this. This is campaigning for women's rights to work, vote, be trained, to hold public office, and end discrimination. However, less than a week later, on March 25th, the tragic Triangle Fire in New York City took the lives of more than 140 working women, most of them Italian and Jewish immigrants. This disastrous event drew significant attention to working conditions and labor legislation in the United States that became a focus of subsequent International Women's Day events. On the eve of World War I, campaigning for peace, Russian women observed their first International Women's Day on February 23rd, the last Sunday in February. Following discussions, International Women's Day was agreed to be marked annually on March 8, that translated in the widely adopted Gregorian calendar from February 23rd, and this day has remained the global date for International Women's Day ever since. On the last Sunday of February, Russian women began a strike for bread and peace. For rights, no doubt, but it is also for peace, in response to the death of over 2 million Russian soldiers in World War. International Women's Day was celebrated for the first time by the United Nations in 1975. And the same protest against war, the same plea for bread and peace is being echoed by feminists even today in Russia. In the streets of Russia, where feminists are taking a procession saying that we do not want war. Again, I'm not trying to glorify, romanticize women's personalities, women's characters, saying that women do not want war. But feminist thought, the critical gender thought, democratic thought does not want war. And that is what they were voicing at that time, and that is what we are voicing now. Alexandra Kollontai, who played a major role in pre-revolution, during revolution, post-revolution times in Russia, she held different positions, and she contributed to several policies, several decisions. She inspired many of the leaders there. She even left her family to serve the nation, to serve the country, to serve the party. And she was a very, very close associate of Lenin. Though she was such a close associate of Lenin, she never, when it came to the gender question, she never compromised on her ideals, on her commitment to gender issues. And like many of us, she's also trying to she was also trying to answer the questions raised by others, like why Women's Day? Why do you celebrate Women's Day? Is there a need to celebrate Women's Day? She says in one of her articles, She says that Women's Day is a link in the long, solid chain of the women's proletariat movement. It is not just women. It is not just any women. It's not just all women, but it is working women, women's work, the women who are working, whether it is at home or in the workplace. It is a celebration of the work, contribution to the workforce. That is a law, that is a link. That Women's Day can function as a link in connecting women's work. And she asks, like, you know, what is the difference? She asks a rhetorical question like, what is the difference between the feminists and the working women? What is the difference between the feminists and proletariat women? Both of them are asking for rights. Both of them want their work to be valued. Both of them are asking for voting rights. What is the difference between the two? Let me read out what she says. Let me quote what she has said. I quote, what is the aim of the feminists? Their aim is to achieve the same advantages, the same power, the same rights within capitalist society as those possessed now by their husbands, fathers, and brothers. What is the aim of the women workers? Their aim is to abolish all privileges deriving from birth or wealth. For the woman worker, it is a matter of indifference who is the master, a man or a woman. Together with the whole of her class, she can ease her position as a worker. Feminists demand equal rights always and everywhere. Women workers reply, we demand rights for every citizen, man and woman, but we are not prepared to forget that we are not only workers and citizens, but also mothers. And as mothers, as women who give birth to the future, we demand special concern for ourselves and our children, special protection from the state and the society. Look at unquote. Look at this, the way she establishes the difference and the way she prioritizes, she recognizes the importance of working women's contribution and at the same time contribution of women to future. Not just as mothers, when she refers to mothers, let us also remember she left behind her children, her home, to join the party, to join the revolution. When she refers to mothers, she also refers to the mothers of the future, that is, those who can mold the future. Like she rightly says, the feminists are striving to acquire political rights because we all think achieving the political power, policy making power should be our priority. But as Alexandra Kollontai says, the paths are different, the means are different. She very clearly differentiates between the bourgeois women and the proletariat women. I wonder who is celebrating the International Women's Day today? Is it the proletariat women? Is it the bourgeois women? Who are celebrating? Who is celebrating? Why are they celebrating and what are they celebrating? What kind of achievements are we celebrating? Our notion of achievement has completely changed. Those who have broken the glass ceiling and those who have reached the heights are considered to be the achievers for us, according to us, this day, now. But was the International Women's Day meant to celebrate a certain kind of achievement? Only know the reaching the heights in a certain manner, in career, in wealth, in adventure. Was it that? Or was it to achieve rights for working women, to create more, worker-friendly spaces, more worker-friendly atmosphere, the right to vote. Right to vote, of course, we do refer to it. but rest of the points we have completely forgotten. We do honor those successful people around us who have reached the heights, like, particularly women who have broken, shattered the gender roles. But what about those women who have been making it possible for us to work in our office, who have been sharing our work, and who have always remained in the informal sector, the house help, the cook, the gardener? So many of them remain invisible, and majority of them do not even get to hear about the celebrations of International Women's Day. On the other hand, we blame them, saying, they don't know their rights, they don't know what feminism is. Why should they know? They have helped us by sharing our work, by crossing the borders, the limitations of their home. They have stepped into our homes, our offices, to help us, right? And precisely it is here that Alexandra Kollontai talks about the new woman. The new woman. Who is this new woman who was different from the old woman? The old woman and the new woman. The new woman, according to her, was a woman who did not hesitate to live alone, who did not hesitate, who was not scared of staying single. She borrows examples from very many classical writings, including those of Tolstoy, to show how women characters are represented in a very derogatory manner as fragile, weak, delicate, emotional, impulsive. She deconstructs all these images and she says that the new woman is not like this. The new working class revolutionary woman is not like this. She can proceed. She can walk on her own, on herself, by herself. She doesn't need any male companion. If she wants, if she says no, she says no. She means it. She can survive on her own. And all this she is saying in her essay called New Woman, which is taken from her book The New Morality and the Working Class, which was published in 1918. Her women, her new women, are independent women, not succumb to jealousy, mistrust, revenge, not at all. He says that the biggest problem with women is that they are mounted, they are controlled, they are shaped to live in their emotions, to live in their sexual jealousies. What matters to them the most is their partner, their male companion. And that has to be broken, that has to be shattered. If that is not shattered, women and their world will always remain the man, and they lose themselves in that obsession for a male companion, right? And the biggest weakness of women as they are molded is feeling jealous of the so-called rival, another woman in their man's life, and that is detrimental for a woman. Respect yourself. If your man, if the man in your life, he likes another woman, leave it at that, because you have to respect yourself. You cannot fall at his feet, or you cannot take revenge at that woman. All that is required is respecting yourself and being strong. And her new woman is capable of taking decisions. She's not fragile like dolls, like a doll, but strong like the working class woman. Self-reliance, economic independence, becoming part of the workforce to contribute to the nation, become the concerns for the new women. And she gives a call to new women to become part of the community kitchen so that they do not spend their entire time in cooking and serving their people and imprisoning themselves in the four walls of the house. She breaks the stereotypes. She creates new images, and she calls for a revolution, not only in society and politics, but also in thought. How thought has to be molded. We talk about mindset in a very casual manner, but there is an entire thought, there is an entire ideology behind the casual word like the mindset. She says that women can take decisions, but but whatever happens, if the man, invokes emotions in her, she forgives the man. She forgets the entire past, and she again starts depending on him. This emotional self, she's not saying that emotional self cannot exist, but she's only trying to say that think carefully, critically about your emotions. Are you wasting your emotions? Are you able to, sustain yourself in a strong manner, or are you giving it to the provocation, to the temptation, to the exploitation, not just your work, but even your sexuality, your sexual labor, your identity, your life, all of them are being exploited. So be careful. Do not allow any system, any individual to exploit you in any possible way. And as she is focusing on uh, the new woman, she also refers to the context of war, the war which is very, very relevant today. And she says, stop fighting against the so called enemies from outside. First, you fight against the enemies within the country, the hierarchies, the institutions, the patriarchy, the exploitation. These are all enemies within one's own country. Why don't you fight them first? Then you can think of fighting a war. Who wants a war? Nobody wants a war. We only want to fight the system and change the system. And it is in this context that she talks about International Women's Day as well. Not just Women's Day, which is celebrated at the national level, but the International Women's Day. And she says, Women's Day or Working Women's Day is a day of international solidarity and a day for reviewing the strength and organization of proletarian women, right? And when she writes her autobiography titled The Autobiography of a Sexually Emancipated Communist Woman, which was published much later, of course, in 1971, it was translated and published. A liberated self, a woman's self, a working woman's self that is liberated in every man comes out. Like her book Red Love, published in 1923, which refers to the concerns of uh, post-World War post-World War psychological developments, relationships, with the dynamics, the gender dynamics. We have seen personalities like this in history. We continue to see such personalities even in contemporary times. Like Dr. Troy Sinha rightly started the session by referring to Maya Angelou, who writes a poem called The Phenomenal Woman, who walks on, who proceeds without bothering about the questions, the glances, the gaze that surrounds her, that questions her. Such women are the women who make our thought, who should be making our thought. Let us celebrate. Let us celebrate the International Women's Day. But let us celebrate the fights, the struggles, the long battles that our foremothers have fought, and the struggles that we have fought and we have been fighting. Let us not reduce the International Women's Day to the reiteration of gender stereotypes. Let us not reduce it to romanticization of womanhood. Let us not fall into the trap uh, of corroborating or being allowing ourselves to be co-opted by the market culture, by the capitalist culture. And let us take this opportunity, particularly when we are surrounded by the war atmosphere, war declared by several systems, several, several systems like capitalism, market culture, feudalism, patriarchy, uh, whatnot. We are really surrounded, and more than ever in history, now we are surrounded by many, many, many challenges, and we are all like making changes, transforming, reformulating in our own capacity. Let us remain very strong individuals as women, and let us declare our courage, our strength once again, not just to celebrate our struggles, as I said a little earlier, just now a few minutes ago, but also declare our solidarity with those women across the world who are struggling to come out of violence, suffering, isolation. And let me stop, let me conclude on this note of hope that we will continue to celebrate International Women's Days, but only to celebrate the solidarities, only to celebrate our uh, our reformulations and the way we have changed the society, the institution, the way we have contributed to the democratization of the systems. Before I conclude, let me once again thank the Pearl Harbor Women's University, the Department of Women's Studies, colleagues, students, and particularly Dr. Kwai Sinha for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your inspiring lecture. Now, I would request Dr. Dishari Royde to deliver the vote of thanks. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you,
You are
Momita. I think I'm audible now.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Momita, for giving me this opportunity of delivering the vote of thanks. First of all, I, on behalf of the Department of Women's Studies, would like to express our sincere gratitude to the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Madam Professor Dr. Shomma Bandyopadhyay, for her consistent support and encouragement that motivated us to organize today's lecture series. A special thanks to Dr. Saidur Rahman, Registrar, for providing immense support in order to make today's event a grand success. We are ever thankful to Dr. Topon Mondol, Professor of Bengali and Dean of Arts, for inspiring and encouraging us to organize today's event. We wish to thank Dr. Tania Chakraborty, Dean of Students Welfare, for active cooperation and support. We are thankful to our Finance Officer, Jagadish Chandra Ghosh, for his kind support. Also, we are thankful to all the non-teaching staff of our university for their constant cooperation. We extend our heartfelt thanks to Professor K. Sunitha Rani, Center for Women's Studies, University of Hyderabad, for her fascinating speech in today's event, and that has been organized today, 7th of March, on the eve of 8th of March, International Women's Day. Last but not the least, I must thank the organizing team, especially Dr. Trisina, Coordinator and Assistant Professor, Department of Women's Studies, Ms. Momita Bishash, Assistant Professor in the Department of Women's Studies, for working hard for the past few days in order to make today's event a grand success. I congratulate all the students for their active participation and presence. Thank you everyone once again for making today's event a grand success. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again. So we are leaving the meeting, ma'am.